Hi there, I'm Woolly Wormhead and welcome to my channel. In today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how to graft garter stitch. If you've worked any of my sideways knit patterns, then you may well have encountered this technique before. I've not done a full video on it before now, only little short snippets on Instagram. I do have photo tutorials on my blog and it's something I talk about a lot. It's a technique I really love. And when I'm working sideways knit hats, especially sideways short row colourwork hats, being able to graft garter stitch is essential. But it's not difficult. It's actually easier than grafting stocking stitch or stockinette. Stocking stitch is the red herring of the grafting world because you can doesn't need any prep. Let's put it that way. Grafting garter stitch and grafting just about every other stitch pattern does require a little bit of prep, but it's not difficult. The prep is actually just bringing together an odd number of rows because a graft replaces a complete row of knitting. It has a relationship with the two rows either side because when you are grafting, you are bringing two sets of live stitches together, and how you treat those live stitches through your graft can affect the pattern. So it affects two pattern rows, but it actually only mimics one full row of knitting. And I'm going to do a longer tutorial explaining that theory another time. It's too much for today. I want to show you how to prep for grafting garter stitch, what to look for, and then I'm going to show you the step-by-step technique so you can do it yourself. It's not difficult, I promise. So I'm now going to switch to the overhead and we're going to have a look at some swatches, and then I'm going to graft in a contrasting yarn so you can see what it's actually doing while we're doing it. Okay, here are two swatches of garter stitch that I prepared earlier. Now, before we even start talking about the prep, there's a couple of things that I need you to know about garter stitch. It might all be knit stitches, but it's actually a two-row stitch pattern. There is a right and a wrong side to garter stitch, and there's also a reverse garter stitch, which is purling all the stitches, which I don't advise anybody do, but it's important to know that it exists. Now, when we look at our garter stitch fabric, we see here there are ridges that are made up of a little bump there, a bump there, a bump there, a bump there, offset little bumps that line up next to each other. In between, we have these V's that intersect in the middle and join each other up. And then we have another row of ridges, another line of valleys, and so on. On the back, where these V's meet, turn that over, there's a ridge. Look at that yarn tail out the way. There's a ridge. And on the back of where these valleys meet, there's a ridge on this side. So that is what garter stitch is as a fabric. It's not all ridges, it's ridges and valleys, alternate ridges and valleys. And that means that when we are grafting garter stitch, to make this pattern continuous, we have to bring together an odd number of rows because the graft mimics one row of knitting. Yes, it affects the two pattern rows either side of the graft as you're finishing off, but it mimics one full row of knitting. And I'm going to show you why when I demo in a minute. Now, the easy way to tell whether you're bringing an odd number together is when you hold your needles parallel. What they need is they need to be the same when you look at them like this. So for instance, this is what I call ridge high. This means that the ridges are sitting butt up to the needle and the back needle is the same. And that means that you will be able to graft these and keep your pattern continuous. This way round, this is ridge low, which means the V's are next to the needle here. Now, the terminology ridge low and ridge high is something I started using when I wrote my first book on sideways knit hats back in 2007. I needed a simple way to explain what was happening when you're grafting garter stitch. And instead of right side or wrong side or reverse or whatever, which was complicated language when you think about the fact that it's all knit stitches. Not everybody knows it's a two-row stitch pattern. Not everybody knows that there's a right side or wrong side to garter stitch. And I needed simple language. So I came up with ridge low and ridge high. And then you don't have to worry about whether it's the right side or the wrong side or reverse garter stitch or whatever. All right. So long as when you bring your needles parallel together, nope, my yarn's getting tangled already. We have not started. So long as when you bring them together, they are the same here. They are both ridge high in this instance, then you'll be able to graft. You can also graft when they're both ridge low, but normally I would just say turn your fabric inside out and do that. Right, it's a bit like when you're grafting stocking stitch versus grafting reverse stocking stitch. You turn your work inside out and graft stocking stitch. You don't need to know 2 grafts in turning your work inside out. It's much easier. If you've got them and they're the other way around, say you've got one that's ridge high and the one at the back is ridge low, then you've either worked 1 row too many or 1 row too few, and you need to check your pattern and make sure which one it is. You can either unpick one or work an extra row, but you need to make sure that they are the same. When you hold them, right, let's get them parallel. This is with both right sides facing, or right sides of the work as we are grafting, I should say. The other way is to check by holding your needles like this, but it's a little bit harder to tell that this one is a ridge low because we need to stretch it out. This one is a ridge high. So it's easier to tell by holding them parallel. Now the graft that I normally teach is ridge high because it's the easiest one. And it's easier to memorize. It's more similar to the stocking stitch one, so it's not like a completely new thing that you have to learn. The mantra that you learn for doing this is much easier. All right, so let me now bring in my contrast yarn and let's get started. So I'm now ready to start the Graft Garter stitch. I have got both my needles held parallel and with ridge high. Now I'm using a contrasting yarn here in a purple so that it will show you how the stitches are worked together. Now, because it's a separate piece of yarn, it's actually not anchored to the fabric, so I need to do that first. And my advice would always be to have the tail that you are going to graft with at the back of your work, because then it brings it forward and we start on the front needle, and that means that you've already got the first kind of connection between the front and back worked. So let me just slide that through there. It means it's going to be a little bit messy at the edge because it's not part of the fabric. But as I say, bring in the yarn, having the yarn tail that you're going to graft with at the back of the work is the best way to do this. Now, the selvage stitches are stitches that need to stay on. So the mantra for grafting garter stitch that's ridge high is knit off, purl on. It's the same on the front and back needle, same both ways. All right. So to work the selvages, we purl on at the front, and then we purl on at the back. Okay. Then we knit off, purl on, knit off, purl on, and that's it. It's the same on the front and back needle. That's what's really cool about grafting garter stitch. You haven't got to reverse what you're doing on the back needle like you do with stocking stitch or stockinette. Garter stitch is the same both sides. Knit off, purl on, knit off, purl on. And at this point, I'm going to stop. If you do stop, always stop on the back needle after you've just worked the back needle. And I'm going to tighten this up a little bit so we can start to see the pattern forming. We'll need to do a few more stitches. Whoop, let's get that in focus there. We'll need to do a few more stitches before you can really see how the pattern's forming, because we've got that messy selvage there where I joined in the yarn. But we can hopefully see there that we're starting to form. There's 2 V's together and there's our ridge forming. So let me do a few more. Knit off, purl on, knit off, purl on, knit off, purl on, knit off, purl on. Let's tighten those up. I always suggest or recommend taking up the slack and tightening up the stitches every 5 stitches or so. You don't want to leave it longer than that, because one of the difficulties that people have with grafting is maintaining the same tension in the graft as they do in the rest of the fabric. So if you don't leave it too long to tighten up your stitches, your fabric will get nice and even. Let me do a few more. Knit off, purl on, knit off, purl on, and let's tighten that up. Okay, and we can see it's starting to form there. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue grafting to the end. I'm going to switch the camera off now, and I'll come back when I've done that, so you don't have to sit and watch me doing this. And then we're going to have a look at how the fabric is constructed and how that ridge fits perfectly into the rest of the fabric. Now, I'm coming towards the end of this graft. I'm literally going to graft these last couple of stitches, and that'll take us to the selvage. And I wanted to show you how to work the closing selvage. So we knit off, purl on. And because we've got these 2 stitches left, we literally just knit off and knit off there. And then we pull our yarn through. Now, I'm going to tighten up the slack a little bit here because I've been doing that throughout the graft, but not on these last couple of stitches. And because it's at the edge of the work, it can be a little bit awkward. Get it into a position that feels comfortable for you. I often turn it around and do it so I'm pulling from this side here. Right. Almond stitches, behave yourself. There we go. Now that we've done the graft, let's have a look at that fabric. Remember how we talked before, how the ridges are made up of 2 parts, little interlocking sections here that are the back of the V's. It's exactly the same in the graft, which is why I say the grafting replaces one full row of knitting. It mimics a row of knitting. Yes, it has a relationship with the 2 rows either side, but it is one complete row of knitting. And let's look on the other side, and there it is there. And you can see also that it's one of the V's that makes up the alternate valleys here. So that is how you do it, and that is why you bring together an odd number of rows to graft, because then your pattern is continuous. You don't end up with 2 sets of ridges sat next to each other, which is kind of like a reverse garter stitch kind of extra bump. You don't get that when you do this. All right. And in the right colour yarn, same colour yarn, that would be completely invisible, which is what you want. Okay, I hope that's helped give you an understanding of grafting garter stitch, how easy it actually really is, how you always need to bring an odd number of rows together to make sure that your pattern stays continuous, that there's a right side and a wrong side and all that kind of stuff to garter stitch. There's so much more to garter stitch than people realise. It's fun. If you do have a situation where you can't make it a ridge high graft and you have to do a ridge low, then you just reverse the mantra. So the mantra, the grafting mantra for ridge high is knit off, purl on, both needles, front and back, you do the same. If you've got a ridge low set up and you can't avoid it, then you would do purl off, knit on both needles. But as I say, I normally say to people, try and make your grafting as easy as possible for yourself. If you've got reverse garter stitch or reverse stocking stitch, whatever, turn your work inside out and do the easiest graft that you know so you don't have to remember another one. I hope this also helps explain why in my patterns they are written the way they are, because I do a lot of sideways knit hat patterns. Let me bring one in. This is going to be a new release in September 2025. This is a sideways knit. It's short row colour work, which is a whole other topic, which I'll do some more tutorials about. But it's sideways knit, which means we work a series of panels. It's worked that way round. And the panel is repeated over and over and over again to make the pattern. And in my patterns, it says, repeat the panel X number of times, and on the final panel, omit the last row as that will be replaced by the graft. And that is why. That little purple line there is why, because grafting mimics one complete row of knitting. All right. So I hope that helps explain that as well, in case you've ever been wondering why my patterns are written the way that they are. Okay, so that's all for today. I'm going to do some more tutorials, hopefully in the future, about grafting and getting nitty gritty because it's a topic I really like, but I'll leave it there for now. If you can do the like, subscribe, share thing, I would very much appreciate it. I would love to grow my channel and help get my techniques out to more knitters so that I can help more knitters with their projects and hat patterns and all sorts. Thanks for your time, and I'll see you next time.